Hey guys, I've been hearing constantly that people should forego buying the Sega Genesis Mini in order instead to buy the Mega SG from Analogue. And although I believe this is kind of a good decision for a lot of people, especially since Genesis Mini is like $80, it's half the price of the Analogue SG, and with paying the extra amount, you're gonna get a very good premium FPGA console that will play Sega Genesis games pretty much on par with the original. And the reason it's not on par is mostly because it's an updated console, so it's not going to be the same. And it's the same thing with the Sega Genesis Model 2, which is kind of a slightly updated console, but it's kind of things just don't operate the same simply because they have a different chip inside for the sound. And although this is going to affect some people, when you're considering the console, the whole point of the FPGA thing is that an FPGA is a chip that basically you can program to be any other chip that you want, as long as it's not like more powerful than the chip that the FPGA chip can handle. But you can turn it basically into any processor that's ever existed, and this is where the magic of the FPGA consoles comes in. Basically, you're getting a console that thinks it's a Sega Genesis completely, with the added advantage that you can also improve certain things. Like for instance, the Analogue SG, it has just better sound, better picture quality. It outputs an HDMI. It looks fantastic, and it's a perfect console for people that want basically a premium Sega Genesis. And what you get for your money is well worth it. You get a 1080p picture, and it plays every game that you basically want to play. And then there's firmware updates that'll, if there's some game maybe that doesn't work for some reason, I'm pretty sure that it could get fixed in the future. Whereas the Sega Genesis Mini is just not going to be that. The Sega Genesis Mini is basically an emulator. The emulator is going to work on an already existing CPU, so it's not going to emulate, or basically it's not a console. The system itself doesn't think it is a Sega Genesis. It doesn't work like a Sega Genesis. It's emulating like a Sega Genesis. And with that, with an emulator inside of the CPU, you're always going to get some sort of lag. And I don't mean game lag, but something's not going to work exactly the same. And that's just unfortunate, the reality with emulation. And that's why some people kind of prefer FPGAs. However, since the console is so old, you're basically not going to be able to tell much of a difference. But when it comes to sound, you may. And the people behind the Sega Genesis Mini, for instance, are the same people behind the classics release of games for the PlayStation 4 and the Switch and all those that you see for the Sega Genesis collection. And I think DF Retro made a video on basically the Analog SG, and they showed you how the sound is different between that collection and the Sega the Mega SG. And you can tell there's a difference in sound. It's not perfect, and don't expect then the Sega Genesis Mini to be perfect. So who's the Sega Genesis Mini really for? It's, I think, mostly for people that just want a system that they can take and go. Whereas I honestly don't see that you can like plug and play the SG. The Mega SG is basically for people that really want the best of the best in everything. They want a Sega Genesis console that is even better than what kind of the original Genesis console was, unless you're some sort of person that wants the system to be exactly as they remember, in which case you want to play it on your CRT, and then you basically want the original Model 1 Sega Genesis. There's just no winning in that category. You're going to want that system. The issue with that for me is I personally would prefer the Analog SG nowadays than I would prefer having an original Sega Genesis. And the reason for this is because when I was a kid, I always wanted that perfect clean picture that you get on the Analog SG, for instance. Even though the game itself doesn't look correct unless it's played on a CRT. Yeah, that is the case. It's not going to look correct. But I remember as a kid, I always wanted that clear picture more and more. I hated, for instance, when I was using the original coaxial cables, they did not look good. When I moved out to composite or component, or what, I think it was composite, yes, it just looked way better, and I remember enjoying it more. But at the same time, I still wanted an even clearer picture. I eventually went with S video, and I think that was the limit of the console, and it was perfect. I remember I hooked it up originally to a 720p HD TV. It was one of those with the projection TVs, and it looked great, I remember, but it wasn't perfect. So I would have taken, for instance, if the Analog SG existed back then, there's no doubt in my mind that I would have loved having that. Like just the look of the picture is it's so clean that it's fantastic. That's just me though. You have purists out there that would definitely prefer the classic console with the CRT, and that's also something I would like to do today. Nowadays, especially looking back, I want to play the games as I remembered them, so I would prefer that. But still, there's a market for the Analog SG. Now, here's the difference though. People that don't mind not having the best of the best or just pretty close to that, and then they prefer the price of performance kind of things, they're gonna prefer buying the emulator or the emulated system from Sega or the Sega Genesis Mini. And the other benefit of it is that it's also kind of semi a collectibles item, mostly because it's coming from the actual company that made the original system, and it's trying to emulate the look of the box and everything. So people are going to try to get this. Basically it's a collectible, and I think that is the main market for those. I think those are mostly just collectibles. I hear people saying like, I'm gonna skip it because I already have this other emulation system, and that's perfectly fine. As long as you're happy with what you have, like how you play the game, you don't need to go out and get this. This isn't for everybody, but there is a market for this. Definitely the market for this is people like me that want this as a collector item. They want the original kind of controllers emulated to a modern age, even though it has the USB. Yeah, I kind of would have preferred the original plugs too, because you can kind of buy an adapter for that and still use it as a USB controller. But I'll definitely take this. Like, it's still perfectly fine. I'm pretty sure that someone will eventually maybe come up with an adapter to connect it to the original controller ports. Maybe, I don't know, the original DIM controllers. But it's not a big deal. There's several of those controllers out there. I would have liked to see newer ones coming out, but still, uh, that doesn't matter anyways. With the Sega Genesis Mini, and the Analog SG, they're just completely different markets. And in fact, if you have an Analog SG and you're a collector, those consoles are still collectible. Like, they go up in price. They eventually get removed from the market, and people still seek them out. I'm still looking for original analog NT systems so I can play the original Nintendo games. I'm kind of would be excited to find that. Unfortunately, those were really expensive, and I never was able to afford it, and it's already been gone from the market for quite a while. And I'm pretty sure I see people sell it for quite a lot still. But again, that's still one part of the market. Some people will go out for that, but that's not an actual system from Sega. So people that want a collectible system will want still the actual system from Sega, even if millions of them are sold, because they still think they'll have values. In fact, if you go and try to buy a Super Nintendo classic right now, the thing will cost you at least $100, and it keeps going up in price. Probably eventually it will go up way high in price because it's already something that's out of stores. There's people that want it, and it's just the way it works with video games, especially these kind of limited releases. And that's why people will still want to get this. And there's a market for this. And then on top of that, I would say there's also a practicality market. It's easier to connect to your TV. Even though the SG is still easy to connect, it's an expensive console. You don't want to necessarily take that around because you might, break it or something. Whereas the Genesis Mini is like kind of small, and it's already kind of made, it's made for traveling with, in a sense, because it's gonna be light, it's gonna be cheap, basically. It's $80. I don't think the single controller system's coming out here. I haven't seen it. I think that's just a Japan thing. So $80 is the price for it. But yeah, I don't think I think that the market for it is pretty clear. Whereas with the Analog SG, the market is the other thing you have to realize that not a lot of people know about it. Like, it's mostly for people that are like probably me and you who are listening or watching this video, because honestly, not everyone's that die-hard of a Sega Genesis fan to even know this thing exists. I probably would not have known of the Analog NT if I wasn't, into video games or retro gaming back in the day. I know a lot of people that still don't even know that exists. The Super NT, I was the one who told, other people about it. Like, no one knew about it. So there is definitely a market for this. And the emulation should be at least top notch for what it is. It's an $80 system. It's going to be, I think, on par with, hopefully anyways, on par with the Super NES Classic. And the reason for that is simply the Super Nintendo Classic didn't really have that great emulation. It had fantastic for what it was. Like, it's the best emulator I've seen for the SNES, but it's not on par with the original Super Nintendo, and I don't expect this to be on par with the original Sega Genesis. It's just going to be a more modernized, more accessible Sega Genesis, and I think that's the market for this, and it definitely is worth the money. I'm honestly gonna go out there. I already have my pre-order. I'm hoping to get it when it comes out on September 19th. I'll probably not be able to because I probably won't be in the States. So someone's going to have to ship that to me, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, honestly, I'm excited, and I don't know. It seems to me like some people aren't because of ad games again, and also because of the PlayStation Classic. But honestly, I think once this thing kind of drops, like the original Nintendo Classic system when it originally dropped, a lot of people were talking about it, but no one expected it to sell out. So like I expect this to have the kind of the same effect. No one's talking about it, or no one's like super hyped about it. Although honestly, there's a lot of hype behind it. Um, but some people, like the mainstream media, doesn't seem to be super excited about it for whatever reason. But once it drops, I'm pretty sure it'll be the hottest toy of of like the holiday season. You probably won't be able to find it until after Christmas. Anyways, guys, I'm signing out. Have a good day. Bye bye.